one of the stories, one of the mythos within Gnosticism was this idea that uh, it, it, it was based on the idea of it tells the story of Sophia, who is wisdom, and Sophia fell to this earth, and she became totally addicted to matter. The old Gnostic texts talk about how she basically copulated with everything, becoming, because she was so attached to it all. But then as she worked through that process, she began to realize that where the true source of things was, and eventually she ended up wedding with the universal consciousness, which was called the Christos in a lot of these early Gnostic texts. And consequently, her individual consciousness united with the greater consciousness of God. And in many ways, it's the story of the fall and then the reintegration of humanity into the greater collective consciousness. But you see a similar story with this idea of in the Matrix, where you have the hero of the story, Neo, who he goes through life.
And Neo, by the way, means new.
Which means new. That's correct. Yeah. He's attached to the world, and he's learning to work his way through it. And then at some point, he has to die to it, and then he's raised from that death through the love of Trinity, who represents that Sophia coming in contact with the greater divine, and then he comes to this greater realization. And
well, it's interesting because if you look at his psychopomp, his soul guide, Morpheus.
Yeah.
Morpheus obviously is a god of the other realm, the dreams. He's an impulse from the consciousness.
Yes.
So he has to cooperate to become new, to become himself. He has to cooperate, as you said, with Trinity, which is the three forces of creation.
Yeah.
It's tes, antites, and syntes, or as they say in the more mythical religions, like in Christianity, God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then you have the interesting thing, he has to visit the oracle. And if you paid close attention, you'll see that above the oracle's door, above the gateway.
Yes.
Did you remember what was written there?
Yeah, well, it was, I know it was Know Satan, but I don't think it was, or Know Thyself, but I think it was in Latin as opposed to in the Greek.
Exactly, and that's where we tie it in, right? Because to know yourself is the clue, isn't it? To gnosis, to give birth to this inner gnosis then. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and to the Gnostics, it should be pointed out that this Sophia archetype actually represented the human soul that incarnates in this world, becomes a soul of personality, and thinks it's detached from everything else. But then eventually it's able to wed with the greater consciousness. And
is this the alchemical wedding?
This is the alchemical wedding, and this is why, even in Christianity, when Paul talks about how we need to make Christ our husband, he's alluding to our soul, the Sophia, wedding with the universal consciousness, the Christos, and through that wedding, the union occurs where we get back to the oneness.
Now, if we assume the somewhat conspiratorial but still founded concept that all great ideas, spiritual births in the world. The original impulses of all religious traditions at some point gets hijacked by one of these antagonistic traditions I talked about, like everything here is real and that is an illusion, or no, everything there is real and this is an illusion. Then you get these guardians, right? These people who want to hijack the connection, this priesthood, these churches.
Yeah.
Now, would that make sense, that concept, if we look at, let's take Christianity then, that they say that, okay, let's make a war on the sacred feminine. Let's exclude that part because it's such a dangerous part, because if people do marry it or make love to it, they will wake up and we can't control them anymore. Is Sophia then the lost sacred feminine impulse of the Abrahamic traditions?
Yeah, it is, for sure. And what's happened with priesthoods of all religions, and and I'm not trying to bash religions, but oftentimes religions have set themselves up as the middleman between the person and God, and you can charge a lot of money by being the middleman. So there's a lot of power there, yeah. And the Gnostics have always said, look, you don't need a middleman. That connection with God is a fundamental part of who you are. You just have to wake up to it. And consequently, this is why the Gnostics have also always been persecuted by different religious establishments that have sought to control.
Yeah, because these two antagonistic forces, the everything here is real or the everything there is real and let's fight, to them, they actually, like I said, they are mutually dependent on each other. Their real enemy would be everybody who tries to console those two poles. And isn't that why all Gnostic traditions, be that in the West or the East, always have been persecuted, always have been marginalized, and never have managed to be a movement for the masses? Because at most times, as we know in known history, it hasn't been a good market. It's very hard to get most people into such a concept. So it's much easier to herd them and control them through some kind of dogmatic middleman structure.
Well, yeah, and the reality is, the Gnostics said that about 80% of the population is asleep. Anyways, they kind of want to be controlled because they don't know what they're doing or where they're going or what they believe, and it's easier for someone else to think for you. And so the priesthoods have always monopolized on that. And but the Gnostics said, at some point you have to wake up for yourself, and that process usually starts out with the person realizing initially that they're more than just a physical body. They're more than just a physical form with physical needs, that there's a deeper part of themselves. And then they have to wake up to the fact that there's a whole emotional side to them, and that their emotions can be used for change in the world as opposed to something that just consumes them. And then they had to wake up to the mental side of themselves, and that the recognition that their mind is actually just part of a greater mind or a greater consciousness, and that there's a greater connection between things. And then once they worked through all of that, then they were ready to symbolically die to the world in their own way of relating to it and wake up to new revelation of who they really were, who they really are, why they're really here, and what they really have to offer. And that's where gnosis would reside. But that whole process takes time, and it takes courage on the part of people wanting to truly examine themselves deeper. And until people are willing to do that, they will always be slaves to others that can manipulate them.